You're listening to Heritage Radio Network.
Welcome to the Business of Drinks, where we go behind the bottle, interviewing beverage innovators and icons about how they built their businesses.
We take a data-driven approach, analyzing the brands, products, and categories that get customers and consumers excited.
And we cover several drinks categories, from wine, beer, and spirits to non-alcoholic drinks, as well as THC, adaptogen, and functional beverages.
So whether you're working in drinks or just interested in the stories behind your favorite brands, join us each week as we explore how companies are unlocking growth at every stage in the game.
Thanks for joining us, and let's dive in. Welcome back to Business of Drinks. I'm Erica Ducey.
And I'm Scott Rosenbaum. Today we're featuring one of the most respected voices in U.S. wine and spirit distribution. I'm talking about Harmon Skurnik, co-founder and president of Skurnik Wines and Spirits.
Yeah, so the company was founded in 1987, and it started as a two-brother operation. So Harmon left his successful advertising career to join his brother Michael in selling what were then virtually unknown wines from Bonnie Doon, Kermit Lynch Imports, and William Sellium, all brands that have become iconic today.
Yeah, now fast forward nearly 40 years, and Skurnik Wines and Spirits is now one of the most influential importers and distributors in the United States. They have wholesale operations in 9 states directly and an import business that reaches the rest of the U.S. Their portfolio includes wine, spirits, sake, and cider.
What makes this story so compelling is the company's deliberate organic growth, never chasing scale for scale's sake. And Harmon shares how Skurnik grew into markets like California, Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana, not through some master expansion plan, but by seizing smart, often challenging opportunities. In one case, for example, they rescued a struggling distributor in Ohio and turned it into one of their most successful regional operations.
Yeah, and Harmon was refreshingly honest about the early years, right? The learning wine on the fly, staying up till 3 a.m. to prepare for a general sales meeting, and navigating the uncertainty of entrepreneurship with his brother. He took a really interesting mindset of what's the worst that could happen, and it really drove and propelled the business forward.
Yeah, totally. And it's not just the company's reach that is impressive, but the values behind it. And Harmon talks about quality over quantity, both in people and product. And he and Michael still taste every wine that enters the portfolio. And with over 270 employees, they still personally interview every new hire.
That deep involvement resonates. One of Skurnik's big success stories is something that we cover, the Pinot Project. This was a brand that they created in 2009 to fill a gap in the market, right? To provide a high quality, affordable Pinot Noir. And what started as a small kind of house label now sells over 65,000 9-liter cases a year. And you can find it everywhere from Costco to Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, and Harmon isn't shy about speaking up on bigger industry issues either. He's a board member on the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance and a fierce opponent to tariffs on European wines. And he argues that these policies really are hurting American businesses far more than their intended targets.
So, if you are a supplier, a distributor, or just a drinks entrepreneur looking to build something lasting, this episode is packed with a ton of wisdom about timing, about hiring, about growing family business, and really playing the long game in a constantly shifting industry.
So let's dive in. Here's our conversation with Harmon Skurnik of Skurnik Wines and Spirits. And now, a word from our sponsor. Is your drinks brand looking to start or expand import and distribution?
Whether you're seeking to enter new markets or you're unhappy with a current distributor and desiring a better fit, you should know about Swig Partners.
Founded by industry experts Eric Siegelbaum and Amy Troutmiller, Swig takes the guesswork and the legwork out of distribution strategy. Swig helps brands and distributors find the right fit for long-term relationships and sales success.
US-based importers and distributors should reach out too. With Swig, they can explore new products for free. And brands, you can get $100 off by mentioning Business of Drinks. Find out more at swigpartners.com/business of drinks. That's swigpartners.com/business of drinks. Harmon, welcome to Business of Drinks. We're so happy to have you here.
Hey, thanks, Scott. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so let's dive right in. Skurnik Wines and Spirits was founded in 1987, and congratulations, the company is coming up on nearly 40 years.
Unbelievable. It's hard to believe, really, but it's true.
Amazing. So, as I understand it, when you all started, you quit your job at an advertising agency to join your brother Michael in running this upstart distributor selling brands like Bonnie Doon and Kermit Lynch wines. Can you share a little bit about what the beginning of Skurnik Wines and Spirits was like?
Sure. Well, my brother Michael started the company, as you said, in 1987. He had previously been in the wine industry, working for a Burgundy negociant, traveling the country and selling wine. And he befriended some California wineries, and he started bringing in some small California brands on the side just for some friends in the New York City restaurant market. And so that's really kind of the very, very beginning origins of the company. And some of those names, are now famous, but they were completely unknown at that time. Like one, for example, is William Sellium, which was, completely unknown in the New York market. And Bonnie Doon, of course, was the first one who said yes to Michael. But it was really, really a small thing on the side that Michael was doing. Meantime, I was working for 10 years in advertising and marketing for for some advertising agencies, the biggest one being BBDO. A lot of people have heard of them. They were famous for doing commercials for Pepsi and Apple Computer at the time, which was brand new. And I also worked on the U.S. Navy account, believe it or not. But at the time, Michael was just getting started, and he had no office or anything like that. But I had a nice office with all sorts of great Xerox equipment and stuff. So I started printing his price lists and helping him, get started with some very, very early versions of computer software. And Michael and I have always been very close as brothers, and we had lunches and we had a lot of talks about things. And he was telling me about this little venture that he was doing, and we sort of said jokingly, if it ever got large enough, maybe I'll quit my job and come work with you. I never thought it would really happen, but the day after Kermit Lynch said to him, "Here's your French portfolio," and quite an amazing one at that, with producers like Vieux Telegraph and Coche de Riz and Burgundy and Colin Delager, et cetera, et cetera. He called me up at work and famously said, "Quit your job." So that was really the beginnings of it. And in fact, we then went to lunch together, famously, as the lore goes, at Keen's Chop House, which still exists. Had over a bottle of William Sellium's Infidel. We, carved our path forward, and I decided to quit my job, which was not the easiest thing in the world to do. I was 30 years old, had a 2-year-old at home, and I had a career, and I was going to drop everything and start from scratch as an entrepreneur before I was a salaried worker. And it was scary, but I always think about what my father always has told me. What's the worst that can happen? And if you can manage the worst that could happen, then then you can go forward. And the worst that could happen was the business would fail, and I'd go back to my career in marketing research, which is what I was doing.
Uh, wow. Yeah. No, the worst that could happen is you go on living like everyone else and you go back and you get a job, right?
Exactly.
Wow. So, taking that leap, I think it's a relevant point for a lot of listeners who might be entrepreneurs themselves. You had this experience of which there was probably a lot of transferable skills. You had some equipment which might have been useful.
Mhm.
But like looking back, were you prepared? Could anything have prepared you for this journey you've been on?
Uh, like I said, I don't think I was prepared for anything that would come up. I didn't know, but it was the ultimate decision was, well, I might as well just take the chance. I'm young. I think the lesson is, if you're young enough and you have the future ahead of you, and the time to take that chance is when you're young. I mean, if I was in my 40s and I had to think about my kids going to college and those kinds of expenses, I don't think I could have done it then. But I think that uh, understanding that if it failed, I would be okay was, I think, the main component in helping me make the decision to go forward. And at
Yeah.
the time, I knew a little bit about wine, but I didn't know that much. I remember the first tasting we did, which was at the River Cafe, rest in peace. And it was a very small tasting. And the first wine on the tasting sheet, and people came in, wine number one was a Corbière Blanc from the Kermit Lynch portfolio. And I think it was Fred Price, who was like at the time the buyer for the Rainbow Room, and he was the most important buyer in New York at the time. And he came and said, "Tell me about this wine." And I was like, "I think it's from the Loire Valley, maybe from Sauvignon Blanc or something." I mean, I didn't know anything. And of course, I realized at that time the best thing to say when you don't know something is to say, "Let me check on that. I'll get back to you." And of course, I learned, it was from the Languedoc, and it was a white wine from very obscure varieties that I had never heard of, and so forth. So, it's a lot of, we learned a lot on the job, and we really, fake it till you make it, and it worked out okay.
Yeah,
Thankfully.
I'd say so. We're gonna zip through literally decades of company history. So let's fast forward a bit, right? I was reading
Okay.
an interview online where this is an interview, by the way. You can dig up things right from
Yeah.
1999, a 26-year-old interview
Wow,
where
it's still there.
it's still there, uh, somewhere in the recesses of the internet. And in it, you shared that 95% of your business was from New York and New Jersey, where Skurnik was based. And I know you all have through the years originally been based in Long Island, then moved to Manhattan in terms of your headquarters. But
Right.
how has your business geographically changed over the last 25 years? Is it still so focused on New York, New Jersey? Have you expanded? How has Skurnik developed?
Sure, sure. It's developed slowly but surely, I would say, and gradually. But at first it was not New York and New Jersey. At first, it was just New York, and primarily New York City, um, uh, and then we expanded into New Jersey a few years later, then on to Connecticut, and each market that we've expanded to, it's been uh, just because it became an opportunity. We never really had a master plan to be into multiple markets, but um, uh, we always look at opportunities that way. We're now in 9 wholesale markets across the country as a distributor, in addition to our importing business, which covers all 50 states, where we sell to other distributors. So we are actually a wholesaler in 9 states. The most recent being Rhode Island, which is great, but it's kind of small. But prior to that, it was California, where we delved into in 2017, and it's been extremely successful. And also in Ohio, where we took over a company that was failing. It was a customer of ours, and they're in 3 states: Ohio, Kentucky, and Indiana. And that's going extremely well as well. So, even though we haven't had designs on becoming a distributor in all 50 states, that's certainly not our plan. Um, these opportunities come along, and where it makes sense, we will expand into those markets. That's it. And then, of course, there was the opportunity to go national, and it's actually around the same time. 1999 is when we first became a national importer, and that came about because we were distributing Terry Thies's German and Austrian wines at the time, and his national importer was kind of sucking wind. And he said to us, "How would you like to take over the national business?" And we were like, "Okay." And that's how we first got a taste of becoming a national importer and having our name on the back label and selling to distributors all over the country. And that's, of course, grown tremendously since then as well.
In the short amount of time, I'm picking up on a theme that you sense opportunity where there's often strife or failure. You mentioned, right, taking over a distributorship in Ohio, Kentucky, Indiana, finding a supplier whose other national importer was failing. Can you speak to, that notion that even in the recesses of failure, right, there might be the potential to really grow and stand out?
Yeah, well, every problem is an opportunity, as someone once said. I, you know, I don't know that that's necessarily a theme. I mean, it's certainly not a theme within our company. Like, failures within our company don't create necessarily successes, although you learn from every failure, or from your mistakes. But in this case, this was a failure of a customer in Ohio who's it was a family business, and they were aging, and they had no succession plan, and they were failing and weren't able to pay their bills. We were their number one uh, supplier and creditor, and the question was, well, they're either going to go out of business and we're going to lose $500,000 at the time, or maybe we can resuscitate this business. And what happened was, we obviously decided the latter. The employees that were on staff at the time, were really struggling. They didn't know whether they were going to get paid, and it was really a difficult moment. And we successfully, that was in 2019, we successfully resuscitated this company to now, I believe, in Ohio and Kentucky and Indiana, we are considered, the fastest growing and most reliable, and the customers and the employees are thrilled that we were able to turn this company around and be successful. And it's great. I love to go to Cincinnati and Cleveland and Louisville and in these markets that I used to just be flyover markets. Sorry to use that term. I know it's considered pejorative. But
when I was in distribution, I loved visiting those markets. There was a little less of the jadedness of the coast, or the know-it-allism, right? It was, thank you for coming. This is a joy. It was remembering what the fun of the business is, right?
Exactly. It's been a fun ride, and we don't grow for the sake of growing. We grow when it makes sense, and so far we're pretty good at making these decisions.
So I'm curious, besides the company's size, you're changing geographic footprint, you're increasing number of offerings, right? What in the business has changed? What hasn't changed, right? Like, what is timeless in terms of business practices, or how you think about the drinks business?
Well, I mean, gosh, we're close to 40 years, you said. It's hard to believe, but I mean, so much has changed. From the standpoint of our own company, in the beginning, Michael and I used to do everything. I mean, we wore a lot of different hats. I would used to stay up till 3 o'clock in the morning preparing for the sales meeting the next day. We used to call ourselves lean and mean. We just didn't have a lot of staff to help. Of course, we were a much smaller company then, but at some point we realized, we needed help. Famously, I keep saying famously. It's not that famous. It's just within our own company.
For
But
listeners of this podcast, it's going to be famous.
yeah. My wife always says, "Hey, you're only famous in the wine world, so relax." But in 1999, the same year you were talking about, we had a business consultant who said to us, at the time, Michael wrote all the checks. I went over all the invoices, and we were growing, and he's like, you really ought to like maybe hire a controller, somebody who has got a CPA and that kind of thing. And uh, we interviewed a bunch of people, and we ended up hiring Jim Lascotti, who's now our chief operating officer, and he really helped transform the company into a serious company. At that point forward, we weren't so much seat of the pants anymore like we used to be, and we became a serious company. But a lot of things have changed, certainly in the wine market. My God, prior to the movie Sideways, let's say, which was 2004. I don't know how long you've been in the business, Scott, but before then, Pinot Noir was a tough sell. You couldn't sell Pinot Noir, or Burgundy for that matter, was really tough. The variety of the moment then was Merlot. Every restaurant had Merlot by the glass. So you're always looking for the good Merlot value, and Pinot was a tough sell. Of course, that movie changed everything, which you know created different opportunities, but of course made it difficult to sell Merlot after that. But of course, things have changed. Prior to back then, the wine critics, especially Robert Parker, was like a huge influence. Today, it's much more fractured. There was no such thing as natural wine back then. Which of course that's a whole loaded term, and we could talk about that. But that's emerged. Craft spirits is a relatively new phenomenon. Last 10, 15 years. So a lot has changed in
Yeah.
40 years.
So, it's widely known or famously known, at least to me, right, that you and your brother Michael taste everything that comes into the portfolio.
That's right.
Right. I'm sure people just imagine all you do all day is sit and travel. And obviously there's quite a bit more than that. But, how does that work? Like, at this stage, do you two go out into the wild searching for new products? Do your portfolio managers pitch you brands? Like,
Mm.
how do you decide what you need and why you might bring something in?
Sure. Well, in the early days, before you have a reputation in the marketplace, we had to, go out and pitch the producers that we wanted to work with and convince them that we were a good choice for them in the New York market. At the time, it was just the New York market. So, as you grow and your reputation, I always say, we don't produce anything ourselves, although we do have a couple of brands that we own and produce. But 95% plus of what we sell are brands that we represent. So we don't really produce anything of our own. All we really have is our reputation. I say that all the time. It's incredibly important. It's something to guard. It's something to treasure. And after being successful and getting a name in the business, instead of seeking out those producers and trying to convince them why they should trust Skurnik for their brand, they started. The tide started to turn where they started to come and seek us out. That makes things easier, but at the same time, today I would say it's a combination of things. We're getting solicited all the time, several times a week, I would say, with new brands, and we also keep our ears and eyes open for new brands that are out there that might fit into our ethos. We Yes, Michael and I taste everything to this day, as we did from day one. It's important, I think, that the company have a palate that is consistent, and even though we empower our portfolio managers a great deal, and they do bring us producers all the time. We will sit together and taste the wines together and discuss whether or not, first of all, if they're good enough, you know, or and which is the primary thing, it has to be in the bottle, and then of course we will look at whether there's a market for it. I mean, great wine can be great wine, but if it's $500 a bottle and no one's going to buy it because it's just way overpriced, we won't take it on, obviously. So, did that answer your question?
Yeah. I'm well, I'm curious, at the intersection of some of the transitions for the company, right? Like when you all started, it was just wine, if I'm not mistaken.
That's right.
There's been the addition of craft spirits. There's been the addition of sake.
That's
What
right.
what led to the decision of those additions? Because those are right typically unknowns, and there are different ways of working with these products, different margin structures. How did you think about now's the time to enter this space?
It's a great question, and it's true. I mean, we started out as a wine importer. We remain a wine importer, but we have branched out over the years. First, I would say spirits. We always had we dabbled in spirits a little bit, from very early on, where we would have, in our visits to France, for example, and in tasting wines, you'd come across a great cognac or an Armagnac, and so we had a few of those early on, but we weren't really serious about it until I would say it's maybe 2012 or so when we hired somebody. I think Adam Schumann, who Michael had met because he was uh, starting a side venture as a restaurant uh, owner in the Caribbean, where he where he has a home down there. And so he created a restaurant down there called Fatty Crab, and Adam worked for Fatty Crab and kind of came in there and helped consult on his spirits program, on his craft cocktail program. They got to know each other, became friends, and we also at the same time we saw the emergence of the craft spirits and the craft cocktail craze that really started to begin in New York and other markets, and we started to get intrigued by it. And yes, it's a completely different business. I said to you earlier, I think, that um, I didn't know a whole lot about wine when I first started, and I certainly didn't know a whole lot about spirits when we started. And what we knew by then was that we needed to hire people who really uh, had a great background in spirits and could really help craft, if you will, the craft spirits portfolio. And I think we've done a great job hiring. We've got an incredible team of mixologists, ex bartenders, uh, who are passionate, and we have a really terrific craft spirits portfolio now. As far as sake is concerned, my wife and I took a trip to Japan in 2015, I think it is, and we this was a kind of a dream vacation. We had been looking forward to going to Japan for many years, and the trip exceeded our expectations to such a great degree. We loved everything Japan. Every all the meals, all the beverages, everything uh, was so eye opening. And on the way back from that trip, I remember thinking, Japanese food in this country is exploding in popularity. Why not? Why shouldn't we have Japanese beverage in our portfolio? And Michael hadn't been to Japan at that time. He went a couple years later. But when I came back and told him about that, he was kind of hesitant and skeptical. Oh, sake is a whole different thing. We don't really know much about it. And a couple years later is when we started in earnest with the sake portfolio. And we hired a guy named Jamie Graves, speaks fluent Japanese, and has helped us craft an incredible portfolio there too.
One thing that I'm picking up, right, is as you grow, you enter spaces that you're not necessarily familiar with, so you have to hire and bring on team members that might have a greater understanding of the space. How how does Skurnik hire in sake, in tech, How do you hire for spaces that you might not necessarily know even what you don't know? How do you build a team that way?
Well, that skill has evolved over the years, I would say. We say often that there's really two major components in being successful. We have to have the right products, let's say wine or spirits, and we have to have the right people. And I think we're really good at both of those things. Those are the two real pillar components of being successful. Um, in the early days, we did everything ourselves, and some companies and some people have a hard time transitioning, and I was one of them in the early days, transitioning from I can do it best myself and I'll do everything myself to delegating to others. But as you grow, if you don't learn how to delegate, uh, that is at your own peril. I think
Yeah.
you can't do everything as the company gets bigger, and you need really great people. And I think we're really, really good. One of the things you mentioned before is we taste everything before it comes in the portfolio, but we also interview every employee, and we're up to 270 plus right now. Every
Wow.
employee before they come on before we hire them, Michael and I both interview them, and we've become good at discerning who can be successful working for us, and who brings the passion, and who's got the knowledge, and who has a future. And we also like to hire people when they're young and have a little bit of experience, but they have a lot of passion, and we like to train them. A lot of distributors, they hire people and they say, okay, here you go, here's your book, here's your samples, go out and throw shit against the wall and see what sticks. But we like to train people. We don't like to waste energy and time. We like to hire good people and give them the tools to succeed.
About the training, I remember hearing this, and I'm not sure if this is still true, but I remember hearing that at some point or juncture, that if you wanted to be a sales representative for Skurnik, you had to work the order board for some period of time. Is
Mm.
that still true? Tell me a little bit about
Mm.
that training, and why make a salesperson kind of do the administrative
That's also, it's evolved over time. We have an incredible, you call it the order board, we call it the sales support team. Just that's a
Yeah.
euphemism, I guess. But we also call it Skurnik University, and we like to hire people, put them into the Skurnik. Some of our best employees, our top managers in the company, started in sales support, on the customer service team, if you will. And there's something about going through that process of seeing a little bit of everything, answering the phones, talking to customers, seeing the product go out, and processing the orders properly and correctly. And we have an incredible team who does that. And the team is constantly turning over, and going into sales, or they go into portfolio management, or they go into other or operations. There are, it's been a terrific uh, development that happened just organically over time. I don't know that a lot of other companies do it that way, but it works for us, and we like to hire from within, and we like to promote from within.
One thing we haven't touched on thus far in the company's trajectory is the fact that, right, with Skurnik, it's quite clear that you and your brother are building kind of a family legacy, if I can describe it as such. How many Skurniks work at the company today?
Good question. Well, a lot more have worked over the years for the company, and some don't anymore. But we definitely are a family business. Currently, besides Michael and myself, uh, both of my children are very, very active in the company. David and Erica, um, and Michael's son-in-law, Oren, is very, very much involved as well on the executive board, if you will. And uh, but at some point or another, my sister has worked for the company. Michael's two daughters have worked for the company, his son as well. So it's a true family business. We have a vision for the future, which includes second generation and hopefully third. And there's absolutely no interest in selling the company or doing what some other distributors do after they've been in business a long time. We'd like Skurnik Wines and Spirits to be here for many years to come. Hopefully another 50. We'll see.
I hope so. I hope so. Working with family can obviously be incredibly rewarding, but obviously there are stories of it being notoriously difficult. Any wisdom to impart for entrepreneurs who want to start their own family business, perhaps with a sibling or a parent or a child? What would you tell them?
Well, I think it starts with having a good relationship with your siblings to start with. I mean, I think a family business can be fraught. There's for every success story, or for every time somebody has told me, that family businesses don't work, or that there have been many examples of family businesses that have not worked well. I think it's maybe even more common than those that do. But I think that it starts with a great relationship underlying. Prior to the business, my brother and I, for example, we were very, very close growing up. He's older than I am. He was always my mentor growing up. We had a lot of things in common. We love music. We love travel. And we had a great relationship. So working together was, a joy. So I think it starts with that. But then, of course, working together can create friction at times, and you have to kind of check your ego at the door, and you have to kind of, what's the greater good? I think one of the things that makes it work is success. It's a chicken and egg thing, but if you are successful, it makes it work better. I mean, luckily we've had a lot of challenges over the years, of course, but overall, overarching, it's been successful. So that makes it easier for sure.
Absolutely. You mentioned challenges, and one that comes to mind over the past decade that's haunted us, and even today is the challenge posed by the entire drinks industry of tariffs. You, as I understand it, are very publicly anti-tariff. Tactically, as a importer, as a distributor, how do you combat tariffs? Right, you've seen and worked through tariffs before. What's the approach that Skurnik takes, and how do you think about it?
It's interesting. You say that we've seen and combated tariffs before. Actually, yeah, once before. I mean, prior to 2019, the word tariff wasn't even in our lexicon. I mean, we had 33 years of operating with complete free trade. There was no such thing as a tariff as far as anybody that I knew was aware of. And it's only been since, I guess, the Trump administration 1.0, where that has become an issue. I'm not sure you're aware, but I'm very much involved. I'm not only anti-tariff, but I'm very much involved in a trade organization called the U.S. Wine Trade Alliance, whose sole function is to fight tariffs in the wine industry. I'm on the board. Ben Anif is the president, and we are extremely involved in trying to prevent these just destructive tariffs from coming into place in the first place. And we are fighting every single day. Unfortunately, it's like an incredible amount of energy, wasted energy, because I'd much rather be, working to build the company and grow the company and find the next great wine or great spirit. But this is something that the wine industry is united on. Nobody that I know of is in favor of these very, very destructive tariffs, especially the one that's currently being threatened at 200%, which would basically put companies like mine out of business, especially if they're not as well capitalized as we are. Small to mid-sized distributors. I mean, if suddenly they had to pay a 200% tariff on wines that are coming into port, it could put you out of business overnight. It's just a trade wars don't. There are no winners in trade wars, unfortunately. And in the case of wine, it's particularly destructive for American companies, much more so than they are for the targeted European companies that they want to hurt. And the reason for that is the three-tier system. We have laws that followed prohibition that said any wine that's imported from France or Spain or wherever has to be imported by an American company, and that wine has to be then sold to an American distributor. That's not the case with a lot of foreign goods. Louis Vuitton makes these incredibly beautiful handbags, but they're brought into this country by a French-owned company. They're sold on Fifth Avenue by a French-owned store. Imported French wine is sold by American distributors to American retailers and American restaurants. And so I think we have cited for every dollar that's purchased from the EU in wine or spirits, it creates $4.52 of American revenue. So if you destroy that market or make it much more expensive and create these tariffs, you're hurting American workers and businesses way more than you are European. It's just like shooting yourselves in the foot. So as far as if they were to pass, I mean, obviously a 200% tariff would basically kill the imported European wine market. So I don't expect that we're going to see that. I certainly hope not. Last time there was a 25% tariff on specific goods from the EU, and it was really painful. But yeah, we had to adapt, and we had, in concert with our suppliers, we tried to mitigate those price increases. And so, even though there was a 25% tariff being paid, the supplier kicked in a little bit, we kicked in a little bit, and we tried to raise the prices a little bit less than 25%, and tried to keep the market somewhat functioning. But it hurt. I think, I don't know what the figure was. With the industry spent many tens of millions of dollars unnecessarily in tariffs, which are taxes. Tariffs are taxes on American companies. Don't let any politician tell you that the foreign companies pay this. The foreign companies pay. The Mexicans didn't build the wall, and the foreign companies don't pay the tariffs. Americans pay the tariffs, and it's destructive. Sorry, I'm getting on a soapbox there.
No, undoubtedly, right? I mean, even in your approach to mitigating, it's very clear that when there are tariffs, they hurt everyone. I mean, and you said it succinctly, right? There are no winners in a trade war.
And if the politicians will argue that it's good for American products, but American wineries aren't in favor of it either, because American wineries have to sell their wine to American distributors, and if the distributor has to lay off half their staff because they can't sell French and Spanish and Italian wines anymore, then the American winery doesn't have as many choices to sell their wines, and so they're anti-tariff as well. And then the argument that, oh, well, we'll just sell more American wine this way, and so we don't need French wine or Italian wine. Well, tell that to the French restaurant who's got a French wine list, who has to have French wines, or an Italian restaurant who needs to have, Brunello and Barolo on the list. Where do you find that in California, or in New York State? So, it's also, it's not a fungible commodity. You can put tariffs on steel and aluminum. Steel and aluminum, steel made in China is the same as steel made in America. So it's a commodity. But wine is famously terroir driven, and they're unique. Chablis only tastes like Chablis because it comes from Chablis and those Kimmeridgian soils with those incredible that incredible minerality and flintiness that you get only from Chablis. You can It's Chardonnay. You can have California Chardonnay, but you can't have Chablis. You know, just one example. There are just hundreds of those, the same examples of non-fungibility.
Absolutely, absolutely. And for those American, wineries, where are they sourcing their corks from? Typically European companies. Where might their bottles come from, right? Again, there are
Exactly.
all these unintended consequences.
Exactly.
But let's talk something happier. Let's talk complete total success story for Skurnik. And here I want to dive in, not into necessarily the fanciest, most expensive, most delicious wines, but something completely, I think, unexpected and surprising, which is the success of the Pinot Project for you all.
Oh,
An absolutely delightful wine. It comes in bottles, it comes in cans. One of my
that's
my
right.
wife's favorites. We're always picking up a can, right?
He has good
Uh,
taste.
yeah, yeah. This wine, it started in 2009. It's been
Right.
a runaway success for Skurnik. What is the story, the origin story? How did it begin? Where has it
Sure.
gone?
Well, thanks for asking. Yeah, well, the Pinot Project is Skurnik's number one selling brand, which is pretty amazing. And we developed it, and we own the brand. So, which is atypical. 95% plus of the wines and spirits that we sell are produced by other people, and we represent them and are passionately sell them and represent them. But the Pinot Project is our own brand, and we decided to create it, as you said, in 2009. And the story is, I mentioned the movie Sideways before, which um, changed the wine market in America. From created created a market for Pinot Noir, and at the time. Uh, there were very few options at that time for inexpensive Pinot Noir. There were some really good Pinots, obviously from Burgundy. There were some really good Pinots coming out of Oregon and from California, in the wonderful places like Sonoma Coast, and Santa Barbara was just up and coming. But there were very few Pinots under $20. And at the time, we were a distributor for a brand called Castle Rock, which still exists today. Uh, and they produced a Pinot Noir that we sold for, I don't know, $12 or $15 a bottle, retail, and it was a big success for us. And we lost the brand. It was like we built the brand, built it up, and then lost the brand. And we're like, geez, and that's just the life of a distributor. You pick up brands and you lose brands. That's just the way it is. But that one really hurt because we didn't have anything to replace it with, and there weren't a lot of options. So we decided to create our own brand at that time. And we uh, the company started with uh, California wine as our the beginnings of our company, and we have uh, always been very, very strong in domestic wines, California wines, and Oregon wines, et cetera, and New York wines now as well. So we have a lot of contacts, a lot of winemaking contacts, and we were able to figure out, how do we hire a winemaker? How do we purchase grape contracts? Uh, how do we produce wine, in a custom crush facility, et cetera, et cetera. And we got a lot of help and a lot of willingness to help us, and we started with just a few hundred cases, and now we're, I think, exceeding 65,000 cases a year, and it's, like I said, it's our number one brand. So um, it started with Pinot Noir, uh, in 750 bottles, and it's branched out, like you said. Now we sell it in kegs and we sell it in cans, etc. In fact, we sell it, you know, Madison Square Garden. You go to a Knicks game, you can have Pinot Project in a can. So it's been a really, really nice success project, success story, and you know we've tried to create other brands over the years, not nearly as successful as this one. This one really has been a hit. Um, and like I said, back then there were very few under $20 Pinot Noirs, uh, so there was not a lot of competition. That really helped really launch the brand. Today there are many other brands that attempt to to go into that space, but I would say that the Pinot Project still is successful because not only is it $20 under $20 and Pinot Noir, but it's a really really good under $20 Pinot Noir. So now it succeeds on quality, not just on scarcity.
Yeah. So you've got this kind of very easily understandable proposition. What it is exactly in the name, the Pinot Project. It's affordable. The label is very very clean. The you could read it from across a room. The letters are
That's right.
bold. But what do you attribute to the the growth driving the growth drivers of this brand, right? A lot of distributors start white labels and they might start with a pallet or two, or it tops out at a few thousand cases. This is a national brand. It's 65,000 9-liter cases in 2024. What has driven Pinot Project to the heights that it's achieved?
Well, number one, it's value, and you know, uh, it's been attracted to to customers that we never really imagined. At first, it was just in New York. We just started locally, and then we started selling it nationally. And like you said, now not only are we at events like basketball games at Madison Square Garden, but we're selling to national chains like Costco, Whole Foods, and Fresh Direct, and people like that. So also, it's gotten pretty good uh, reviews in the wine publications like the Wine Enthusiast, given it 91 points, numerous vintages, and that's really helped with point of sale. Um, we have a marketing team. Because it's our own brand, we treat it like we're a winery and we have a brand. We have a team that handles the marketing and the social media, and we've tried to create a kind of a, I don't know, I don't always like the term lifestyle brand because it's kind of, it indicates that maybe it doesn't matter about the quality. It's all about you know the social media and the idea of how you use the product. But in this case, we use that to our advantage. We have a great website and social media team. So I think that in building a brand like that, all of those factors are important. And it seems to have been a combination of all these things that have helped lift the brand and made it successful. I forgot to mention we also branched out into Pinot Grigio on the white side. So, there was consistency there with Pinot Noir being the Pinot Project. That Pinot Grigio would be a good line extension. And so we added that later on, and that's maybe 20 or 25% of the business is white,
Oh,
and we
wow.
also have a rosé as well. So.
I'm curious, one thing that I'm absolutely fascinated by is the fact that one way you breathe life into this brand is by giving it a dedicated staff. As you mentioned, its own website, its own Instagram. A lot of, you know, uh, distributor or wholesaler owned brands don't necessarily have that. What was the decision making process? When did you know, like, this thing has got legs and we need someone who's just in charge of, I don't know, national sales, and I'm making that up, or just in charge of marketing this as its own entity?
Uh, like everything else we do, it's happened organically. We just kind of evolved that way, and we realized what's best for the brand. I mean, I would say that uh, you know the reputation of distributors in general in the wine industry is not always great. They have a warehouse, they have trucks, they make deliveries, they take orders. Um, we've always kind of felt that we were a little bit more than just a distributor with the brands that we represent. We've always felt that we were their marketing partner. We feel that that's what kind of makes the wine industry interesting, not just moving boxes, So we're kind of used to marketing over the years with our partner brands, and so it kind of came natural that in building this brand, that we would employ some of the same techniques. But yeah, because it was so successful in our number one brand, we were able to afford to hire uh, marketing staff to be dedicated to this and other core brands. We don't have anybody whose sole job is to sell the Pinot Project, but it's a big part of the core brand manager and the marketing team, I would
Got
say.
it. Got it. You know, uh, Imagine yourself a winery, a supplier. Given all that you know about distribution, if you were looking for a distributor, what might you want to learn that would uh, help you make your decision? Help separate a mediocre distributor from a fantastic distributor. What would you ask a distributor if you were a supplier?
Well, what I wouldn't ask is how many reps do you have on the street, because it's really the quality of the reps rather than the number of the reps. Um, and we have always prided ourselves on being good at hiring really good people, whether they're in back of the office or front of the house. And our reps, I think, are great. So I think it really is. The reps are the ones who are out there on the front lines. They're the ones who represent your products with passion. They're the ones who make the sales, and the quality of your sales team is the most important thing. That said, the company has to be uh, capitalized well. You have to be able to pay your bills. I don't care how good your reps are. If you can't pay your bills, supplier doesn't want to work with you. So you have to be. We say often, it's the wine business. So you have to be good at wine and you have to be good at business. And a lot of companies aren't good at both. That's it in a nutshell, I would say.
Fair. So, Harmon, I'm curious. What's on the horizon for Skurnik? We've seen so much growth, so many changes. What are the plans for the future?
Well, you know, we uh, we want to be here for many, many years to come. So we have a second generation in the company. We're looking forward to uh, being here and continuing to grow and continuing to be relevant for many years to come. It's really more of the same. We want to always find the newest and the best quality wines and spirits. And as far as expansion is concerned, we're in 9 markets now as a wholesaler. We're not really looking to expand, but we are opportunists. So if something came along and it made sense and we could be successful at it and we can be profitable at it, and it helps uh, enhance the legacy of Skurnik and make the company better, we will consider it. But it's definitely not a master plan. There are other companies, out there who, they want to be distributor in all 50 states. That's their goal. They want to grow and then sell to an investment firm, or they want, that's what our competition looks like. We are a family business, just like our suppliers. One of the things that I think that we really relate to our suppliers is because they're family businesses. Most wineries are a family business where they have their children in the business. The winemaker, the son or daughter becomes the winemaker eventually, and we're kind of following the same path. We've got our children in the business too. We're training them to someday take over, and that really feels good to a supplier. They like to have a company that's a family business like them. So rather than to sell to a distributor that's owned by some investment firm who wants to just flip the company in 3 years and cut back the staff because there's you know overlap and the way it works with mergers and acquisitions. That's not what we're about. We are a family business who loves what we do. We're just as passionate about it today as we were on day one. Those are all uh, aspects that make you successful, and we want to continue it.
Uh, Great. A final question that we ask everyone nowadays, right?
Sure.
A winemaker, a drink entrepreneur, a craft spirit producer, someone just starting out, they ask for a recommendation, be it a book, a movie, a class, a person to follow on LinkedIn or Instagram. What or who do you recommend that would provide the greatest insight besides, say following yourself on Instagram?
Uh, well, as far as books are concerned, I mean, I'll mention a book that was very influential to me when we were starting out at the time. As we were the first imported portfolio we ever had was Kermit Lynch's portfolio, and at that time, I think it was the late '80s, where he published a book called Adventures on the Wine Route, and many people in the industry have read it, but I read that. That was the first book I read that explained what importing wine was like. Traveling to the wine country, going into the cellars, talking to the producers, and figuring out what you're going to buy. It was a terrific book that really gave me the flavor of what this business is about, and it's relevant today as it was in 1988 when it was published. So I would recommend that. I also love the book called, I think it's called Secrets of My Life. It's by Peter Sichel, who just recently passed away. Peter Sichel was famous in the wine industry in the 60s and 70s and 80s, I guess. He created Blue Nun, which used to be the number one selling German wine in America, a runaway success. But prior to that, he was fighting in World War II, and he was in the CIA, and he has an incredible life story of how he evolved into the wine business from that. And so, I think that both of those are helpful to learn about what the wine business used to be like, and a lot of those principles hold true today. Uh, you said movies. Sideways, of course, is a wonderful wine movie. Um, uh, book books, I guess. Windows on the World wine course. I think I took that when I was just getting started. Kevin Zraly's course, really for beginners, and it was very, very helpful, and it's helpful for anybody. Um, and people to follow. I mean, I'm a big fan of Jancis Robinson, so I think she's maybe the best wine writer out there today, because it has become a lot more fractured. But she's the real deal. I think I would follow her.
Well, excellent. Thank you for those recommendations and for sharing the history of Skurnik, the insights, and the successes. Harmon Skurnik, thank you again for joining us.
Thank you, Scott. It's really been a pleasure.
Hello and welcome to Last Call. I'm here with Caroline and Erica, and today we are discussing an article that has got people talking online. It's in Punch and it's by Dave Wondrich, and the article was titled "Why Is My Drink So Damn Weird?" He kind of bemoans the current state of the cocktail zeitgeist, as it were. He talks about cocktails today having 5, 6, 7, or more ingredients, some of them obscure, house concocted and combined in ways intended to startle. It is fair to say that Dave Wondrich is not pleased by this trend. So I wanted to get your all take on is he just being a little grumpy? Do you like simple cocktails? Do you like these things that you can't necessarily make at home? What are your thoughts?
I'll kick us off. So I do. I think that going out and having a super elaborate cocktail, it it makes me happy, and it rationalizes why I'm spending a ton of money on a cocktail. I like the experience of it, and if you're at a bar that can make a really elaborate cocktail, it's easy to get a simple cocktail too, if that's what you're in the mood for. You can get a Negroni, you can get an old fashioned. Obviously, a bartender would be happy to make you a classic at a bar that only offers really elaborate cocktails. What do you think, Erica?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, David Wondrich, one of the most renowned authors and cocktail historians. So he comes to this steeped in a very deep history of cocktails over the centuries, truly over the centuries. And so I think, his perspective of why do we have 20 different ingredients in a cocktail is totally sound, because oftentimes I have to say that I'm looking at these cocktail menus and I'm like, I can't even picture what this cocktail may be like. There's so many ingredients and they seem so disparate and unusual. So oftentimes I'm going with the classics. I'm curious to see what the house style is for a Manhattan or for a Negroni. And those are my favorite cocktails anyway. So I'll try those and see if anyone has optimized the classic. But I think, there's just too many bars that are trying to go too far. So I don't need like almond plus yuzu plus a smoked scotch. Like I don't need a the peat to go with all these other flavors, and it just can be a little bit much. And then I end up thinking like, god, like I would rather see someone optimize a penicillin, and maybe they do a slight riff on the kind of honey ginger syrup or something like that. Like it doesn't have to be that complicated. And there is definitely the risk of bartender abuse. So they have muddled the ingredients, and the thing that you get just takes sort of muddy, and like it could maybe lose a couple ingredients. So I actually would err on the David Wondrich's side and say that I appreciate more optimizations on the classics rather than going so far down the line that I just can't even picture what is in a particular drink.
My feelings are when I go out to a bar or restaurant and I get a drink, I want to encounter something that I would not typically make or find on my own. In whatever form that takes, whether it be an optimized classic or something completely new. My contention is less with the number of ingredients, and more about how they are described on a menu. I don't like when I see a cocktail menu that lists 4 ingredients and I don't know what the dominant flavor is. Is this going to taste like banana? Is this going to taste like grapefruit? Or is this going to taste primarily of rum? That I don't want to do work. I want to enjoy myself, right? That is why I am paying for this experience. So whether it is an optimized classic, which I have an idea of what that will taste like, that's great. Or if it is new and experimental and uses more ingredients than I might otherwise anticipate, that's okay too if someone's there to help me along the way and guide me rather than confound me.
This reminds me of something you said, Scott, on Steve Ribley's episode about how when someone sees a bottle of, uh, you know, a flavored wine, there's no friction. They totally understand what that's going to taste like. So I feel like that's kind of what you're describing, and I don't disagree. I don't want my answer to be confused with I want something that makes no sense and tastes like crap. I'm a little bit overly optimistic and open minded sometimes, um, but I definitely want something that at least one of the ingredients has there's been care taken in put into it that I would not do at home. Like I'm not fat washing. I'm not like peeling limes and soaking them in sugar to get the oils out of them. So I want that in my cocktail.
And I think that will cover us for today. So thank you for joining us on the Business of Drinks. Please follow us on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to tap that notification button so that you can be informed whenever a new episode is released. Please help spread the word by rating us 5 stars, please, and sharing us on your socials. It really does help us find new listeners and grow our audience. Finally, If there's something that you'd like us to cover on the podcast, a topic that we haven't yet engaged with, please reach out to us at podcast@businessofdrinks.com or reach out via our socials on Instagram or LinkedIn. We want to hear from you, and we really do respond to all the messages you send to us. See you next time.